All right, Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to sit down with you today. I believe you are our third episode in the Spotlight Bracebridge series. So we cannot wait to dive into all things brew culture today. So thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start off with some quick fire questions? I guess number one, have you been
Sure.
featured on podcasts before?
I have, yeah. Just 2 weeks ago, I think we did one. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. So you're a seasoned veteran at this point, right?
within the last year, especially. Yeah,
Amazing. Yeah, it's becoming quite the popular medium.
yeah,
So, very honored to have an hour of your time to feature you on your next one. Could you tell us where you grew up and where you live now?
for sure. Yeah, I grew up in Waterdown, Ontario.
Mhm.
Spent, yeah, born and raised. Spent 19 years there, and soon after high school, I was exited and spent a number of years all over the place. I've been all over the map from Canada, the States to Central America, and back to Canada. I lived in Vancouver for a number of years, and I currently live in Bracebridge in Muskoka. Been here 6 years now.
What was the driving factor for you to quote unquote settle down in Bracebridge or choose that as your home?
A couple of factors. I mean, between business, we had a business that was growing at the time. We'd started in Vancouver, and we had also just started a family. So having that sort of feeling of needing some space. We're very active people, love the outdoors. So between those two things sort of pulling at us, we had looked at Squamish, BC, and at that time housing prices were skyrocketing over there, and very quickly we looked at cottage country. I was a cottage kid growing up, and it just seemed like a an easy move for us. But now that we're here, we love it.
Absolutely. And I can see why. It's
Yeah.
absolutely stunning up there. So curious, kind of going back into your earlier days, did you always know you wanted to start a business or become an entrepreneur, or is that something that hit you later in life?
Yeah, no, I think I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was just sort of getting to that point, right? Gaining the confidence and I think finding my path. I originally started school in forensic biology. That's what I
Oh,
initially went to school for. Yeah, my dad was a forensic detective, so I grew up around it. Through the '80s and '90s with him, as a forensic detective, and it's what I grew up around and I loved it. I just certainly had a passion for it. But once I got into school and started really looking at where I'd be professionally, it was, quick realization that this isn't quite what I wanted. So I took a couple years off, stumbled my way into business and sales, and went back to school for business and just absolutely dove right in. And I think at that point, that's when those early feelings of, hey, I need to do something myself, started to begin. And then it was just sort of a transition of going through different experiences to get to where we are today.
hmm. Looking back on the journey, do you see each one of those experiences that led you to brew culture as valuable, or do you have any like regrets in your career path, or can you see what each contributed to where you are today?
Yeah, no, I can totally see where each contributed, the good and the bad. I mean, mostly all great experiences, but previous to brew culture, I had a pretty rough experience. And in hindsight, it taught me a lot. And without it, this wouldn't be possible. So,
I know it's
mhm,
always funny. People, they often say, like, oh, I wish I would have started this business sooner, or I wish I could have found
yeah,
my true calling sooner. But I always think, like, well, I actually think like you had to go through all of these
yeah,
failures or challenges or just like weird blips in your career
hmm,
path in order to find the thing, right? It doesn't just magically happen in your
yeah.
20s most often.
100%. I wouldn't have been prepared for it. And if I look at all the experiences we had in the last 7.5 years in running Brew Culture, um, I wouldn't have been prepared, like I said, for a number of things that have happened through those years. So, I take the good, take the bad, however the song goes, and yeah, everything was valuable for sure.
So you said you spent time after you kind of gave up on the dream of forensic biology, then
Hmm.
you moved into sales and marketing. At what
Yeah,
point does brew culture come in? Like, can you take us to that point in your life? When did the
yeah.
idea, when did the light bulb moment go
Um,
off?
it wasn't necessarily quite the light bulb moment. Maybe I was fortunate enough to have been hired to start another company, similar to what Brew Culture is. We were a hop distribution company, so we were specifically distributing hops, not other ingredients or anything. But I was lucky enough to land the managing director role there, for a startup. What was a startup at the time, and yeah, I mean, I knew I knew where my interests, were. Of course, I was always interested in beer, and I was always interested in wine. I have passion for that. I have education, background in those areas as well. But I never really found the opportunity to dive into it. And I looked at maybe some sales jobs and that, but it just wasn't quite for me, for what I was looking for. So when that opportunity came about, I jumped all over it. I thought it was a fantastic opportunity, something I could sink my teeth into. And admittedly, I'm a bit of a control freak, and this gave me an opportunity to do that from the ground up, and have some control on where my vision of that company went. So it wasn't necessarily a light bulb, for me. It was going through that experience, and the hardships in that experience, that led to brew culture, and then ultimately, taking again the good things that we took out of that, and some of the negative things, learned from that, and then roll that into what is now brew culture.
Mm. So
So.
when you first kind of decided, like, okay, I'm going to do this as a business,
Mhm.
were you the type of entrepreneur that kind of sat back and wrote an elaborate plan and kind of went in your cave? Or did you just like get started and kind of like wing it, and or somewhere in the middle?
So, well, yeah, probably a little bit in the middle. Maybe I was a little bit more prepared, obviously, because I just gone through the process, with another company. Um, so I definitely had that knowledge behind me. I knew, what was working, for us, and the things that we had struggled with. So I was a little bit more prepared. But yeah, I'm definitely, more the type A personality. I just went for it.
Mhm.
Believe in myself and believe in the vision. And I took the $20 I had out of my personal account, put it in a brand new flashy business account, and popped up my laptop in my daughter's bedroom and called it a day.
Called it a
So
business.
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's sometimes like one of like we need to do those like one or two things, whether it's
Mhm.
opening the bank account or finally registering the
Yeah,
business name or buying the domain of the website, which makes us feel like, yeah, this is valid. And that gives us the juice
yeah,
to keep going and to do that next step and
yeah,
that next step and that next step, right?
exactly.
So, in business, we often talk about having your unique value proposition or whatever your unique differentiating factors are. So, obviously, there are other brands, other businesses
Hmm.
that do what you do in terms of distribution. So, I'm curious,
Hmm.
what makes brew culture unique versus other ingredient suppliers?
Good question. I mean, I think honestly, it's our relationships.
Yeah.
We'll start with our relationships with our supplier partners. I was lucky enough to, um, and admittedly, the relationships that we have with our suppliers are not suppliers that I had worked with previously. So they're new suppliers to Brew Culture at that time. I was lucky enough, and I guess I'm just, again, that personality where I do the digging. I find out who I need to talk to, and I just make those phone calls. So I'm pretty determined that way, and I kind of find my way in there, where I can. And I was lucky enough to put in some key relationships with key suppliers around the globe. In Yakima, Washington, Czech Republic, Germany, France, Slovenia, wherever it might have been. We were very fortunate to create those relationships. So I think on the supply side, it gave us an opportunity to be able to provide the highest quality product that we could, knowing who the partners are that we are working with, and then flip that over to the customer side too. The relationships that we have are key. I think we're a big enough company that we can supply anybody, but we're still small enough that we can be nimble, and we can still sort of be that personal touch that a lot of customers want, right?
Mhm.
um, there's a lot of, well, I shouldn't say there are a lot. There are probably two or three larger companies that are big, multinational companies that are widely used by the craft brewing community. But I don't think, not to their detriment, but I
Mhm.
don't think they can be quite as nimble as we can be, and add that personal touch, or at least a level of personal touch that we can add, on our end. So definitely, I think that's the biggest factor.
Mhm. It reminds me of a quote that says like I think it says, I don't care what business or what industry you're in the business of relationships. And
Hmm.
it's so true. It's such a common thread when I ask people, like, what is it that you attribute your success to? Or what is it that really makes your brand stand out? It often comes down to those one on one relationships. Like, we're never just shouting at the masses, being like, everybody buy our products. It's
Yeah,
coming down to a one on one conversation and how you treat that person and how you made them feel and what you do afterwards and how you follow up with them. And so we can't ever lose sight that our best marketing effort really is in keeping the strength of every single relationship, because that'll
for
always pay
sure.
dividends.
Yeah, no, I think that's true for, for most industries, but especially here in the craft beer industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what this industry was built on.
Mm-hmm.
Camaraderie and relationships. It's friends. It's sort of the small guys taking on the big guys, right? And
Yeah.
that's the basis of what this industry is about. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
relationships are key.
For sure. So you kind of said that you were more of like the type A person who kind of just like went after it, and you were obviously quite resourceful. But
Mhm.
I know now you obviously have many people working for Brew Culture. So can you remember the moment when you realized you could no longer do this as a one man show or a one person team? Like, bring us back to that time,
Mm.
and how you knew it was time to expand the vision beyond yourself.
I probably waited a little longer than I should have, admittedly, but yeah, no, I mean, around year two, we're entering year two. The business is growing quite quickly, and a lot of that had to do with a being a new business, and just sort of the growth, that we were on at the time, but also the industry as a whole was growing dramatically at that time. But it was also a time when our business, a lot of it was expanding in Eastern Canada. Our biggest customers were in Ontario, and we're starting a family on the personal side of things, and looking at those things. So at some point, I guess early maybe 2015, we're about 2 years into it, and my wife and I looked at each other, and we knew we needed to make a move professionally and for our family. So obviously that's what brought us to Bracebridge.
Mhm.
Um, and then at that time, our location was based out of Vancouver. So we were going to be creating a second location, which would ultimately become our headquarters. But our first location we'd be leaving behind. So I reached out to a friend of mine who, if I thought I was going to leave my business, my little baby, my new baby in the hands of someone, I was like, this is going to be the guy. So I handpicked, and I just hoped that he'd say yes, and somehow was able to convince him to leave a fantastic job at a brewery friend that we have in Vancouver.
Mhm.
Convince him to come over, and he took over as our Western sales manager. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was probably admitted a little bit later than I would have, or I should have
Mhm.
done it. I think when you're an entrepreneur and things are still new and they're growing, you're trying to hold on to everything you can, because you've
Mhm.
got 100% of the control. At the same time, you're feeling it sort of slipping away because you're not able to provide the level of service that you should. So
Mhm.
yeah, ultimately physical move is what forced it.
Yeah. And can you kind of fast track us to where your team is at today? Because I know since then you've obviously made many more hires, and brought a lot
Yeah.
more awesome talent into the brew culture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got three locations. So headquarters, of course, here in Muskoka and Bracebridge, particularly. Vancouver is our location on the west coast, and we just
Mhm.
added a third location in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, as
Oh,
well.
wow.
So in each of those locations, we have a sales manager that oversees the sales of the company. Um, and then here in house in Muskoka, we've got a staff of about, where we had almost a dozen people, between marketing and sales support and operations. We've delivered vehicles, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's sort of where we're at now.
And what
A
is
big
your
change from my
role in
daughter's
the
bedroom.
company? What's your role in the company today?
My role now, I'm mostly I've pulled out of most of the day-to-day operations. I'm trying to focus mostly on business development.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are going on sort of in the background that I'm sort of the driving force of, whether it be expanding on our product portfolio. We're looking at expanding. Well, pre-COVID, we were very close to expanding into new markets internationally as well. So those are still going on in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly business development, and of course key relationships, key partnerships with our suppliers and our brewers. So I still keep my hands in on a little bit of that. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I think that's so awesome to hear that you've kind of come to a point where you can pull yourself out of the day to day
Mhm.
operations so that you can keep dreaming how big this company can become and how many relationships and people you can help with your products. And I think so often where entrepreneurs get caught up is they're so bogged down in the day-to-day
Mm,
stuff, things that they could pay someone else to do, that they actually lose that visionary tendency of like dreaming and just having a clear
mm,
mind to identify opportunities and to think about the next chapter. And so it's inspiring to hear that you've created some space for that and to actually think on behalf of the future brew culture versus just where
yeah.
you are today, right?
Again, admittedly, it took a little longer than probably it should.
Yeah.
Again, it's just, we try to keep things as lean as we can, and
Mhm.
I for far too long, I think I tried to, manage both sides of it, but eventually, you come to the realization that you have to pull away, and that you can, especially if you get those key people in place, you can pull away, and other people can do a fantastic job, probably better than what I could do,
Mhm.
particularly if I'm doing, that end, holding on to, the sort of the vision of the company as well. So, yeah, no, I'm very grateful for where we're at right now, and to be able to pull away from that, and
Mhm.
just focus sort of on the future, and try not to sink the ship at the same time.
Well, it sounds like you've fired yourself from the roles where other people can do
Yeah.
them better than you. So the ship isn't going to sink because there's probably
Yeah.
better people in place doing the
Mhm.
things that you used to have control of.
Yeah, I think who is it that said it? Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you.
Yep.
I'm trying to do a good job of that. So
I think that's epic. So,
yeah,
congratulations. Okay, so I want to pick your brain on some business tips because we have a lot of
yeah,
aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening to the podcast and they love hearing just success nuggets and just
mhm.
general tips for running a business. So, here we go with the first question. What is one skill set or piece of advice that you started your business with that has served you well up until this point?
For me, definitely believe in yourself. I've always been a determined person. I've always had thick skin. I've developed thicker skin, over the 7.5, nearly 8 years of brew culture. Yeah, really believe in yourself. When I started brew culture, there were certainly, a handful of people that did not believe that I could do this. And they made it very clear, what their feelings were. And, I heard some pretty, nasty things early on. Unfortunately, it was just a reality at the time. But I had some thick skin, and believed in, what the vision was, and what I wanted, and what I, believed that I could create,
Mhm.
and just, kept the nose to the grindstone, and I think it served me well. That's certainly a personality trait that I think I've always had, but I don't know if I really identified it as much as I, began to, about 7, 8 years ago.
Mhm.
So, yeah, believe in yourself, and don't let people tell you you can't, for whatever reason that it is. Just if that's what you want to do. My dad said, one time when I was young, um, find what you're passionate about, and find a way to make money doing it.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much magic at the crux of that, like where your passion
Mhm.
lies, but also where there's a demand, like
Yeah,
financially. Like, obviously, if you're passionate about
yeah,
something that nobody wants to buy, then that might be a
yeah,
struggle. But
a hundred
yeah.
percent.
So you're
Yeah,
saying you're passionate about beer and Canadians love drinking beer.
yeah. I find a way to get paid. So,
I love that. But,
yeah. Well, you got to enjoy what you do. So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's so true because there are probably so many dips in this journey where you're like, why am I doing this? Like you said, you have
Hmm.
pretty thick skin because I'm sure you've heard it all. You've had, customers come at you or orders that didn't show up and
Hmm.
it's not always going to be sunshine and
No,
rainbows, right? So you have
no.
to, number one, like you said, believe in your vision enough to
Hmm.
get out of bed on those dark days and
Yep.
keep going because that's probably the point when a lot of people quit is when they feel defeated after a few negative reviews and they're like, all right, I guess this just isn't going to work. It's those who pick back up and say, I still believe in this and I'm still going to get up and chase it. And like
Yeah,
nobody will believe in your vision like you will. Like nobody cares as much
for
as
sure.
you do.
Oh, for sure, and that's probably partly why I've held on to certain things within the company over the years a little bit longer, because you feel like nobody will care as much as you do, but you find those key people, they will care. You treat your employees well, or we of course try to do as best by our employees as we can, and
Yep.
they're going to care. They're going to have vested interest.
Hmm.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of to play off of that other question, what's one
Mhm.
skill set or piece of advice you wish you knew when you started your business that you didn't know?
Skill set accounting. I wish I paid more attention in my university accounting classes. Yeah,
Same.
it's. I learned very quickly in the first 2 years. I knew that was not my skill set. It was not my forte. But man, did I make a mess. So,
Yep.
I would, if I can offer any piece of advice, not everyone can hire, out of the gate. Not everyone can hire, within the first 2 years. I didn't.
Yep.
But if you can find somebody, whether it's a friend or a family member, or even just an outsourced accountant or bookkeeper that can help once in a while to at least make sure that you're on the right track. Certainly, for me it would have helped massively.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's a skill set I just don't have. I'm better at selling, and not doing the financials on the back end of it. So I realized that very quickly.
I can very much relate to that. And then one time I
Yeah.
heard somebody saying, like, the first thing you should outsource is your bookkeeping and accounting. And I
Hmm.
was like, you mean I can
Yep.
outsource this? Great.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't care how much it
Yeah.
costs. It is not my strength. And like, I feel like I'm driving myself insane trying to do this thing. But I also,
Yeah.
wanted to give myself an opportunity to learn it so that I knew
Hmm.
what I was outsourcing. So there's this
Yeah.
balancing act of wearing all the hats, but then knowing which ones to take off when you have
Yeah.
the money or the resources.
Yeah, understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, and of course I knew that was a weakness. But I've certainly I've learned a lot since, in the time since then. So that's the positive there. But still understanding that it's better that somebody else handles it. So.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you are not like the chief marketing officer of the business anymore, but I'm
Hmm.
assuming you
No.
have some fun little strategies up your sleeve. And I'm curious, like, what has been working well in terms of marketing and promotion and just growing awareness of brew
Yeah.
culture?
Yeah, I think with a lot of, most businesses, you've got to go through that growth spurt where, you're handling a lot of that stuff on your own. Not everybody can afford a marketing team, or even to outsource those things. So, I mean, and it's very common in the craft beer industry. Most craft brewers, don't have a marketing person,
Yeah.
or at least they have to develop and get to that point. So, we were lucky enough actually just in fall of last year to bring on a marketing director, just fully help guide us. So I
Yep.
mean, we were well into year 7 before we brought on an actual marketing department.
Mm-hmm.
But our marketing director's done a fantastic job in helping us build some of that brand identity that I think we always knew was there, but we just needed help putting it together and putting it out there,
Yeah.
to the world. So and I think with COVID, a lot of things have changed. Obviously, we're doing a lot more of this, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
in front of people where we're used to. So I mean, that's always been our marketing strength, is being in front of people, and the relationships that come from that. Our
Yeah.
industry is full of events and parties and all sorts of stuff. We don't. We have the conferences that are all over the place, and we go to those conferences and we talk a little bit of business. But to
Yep.
be honest, where most of our business happens is at the after party, and
Definitely. Yeah.
when we create those relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
so we've had to make some adjustments for sure with COVID. And I think for us, bringing on that marketing director and helping us, create new content, to be shared socially, creating webinars, and we've really sort of taken on an educational piece this year. And
Mm.
it's new for us to do it the way that we're doing it now digitally. But it was something I think even pre-COVID we were lacking. We just relied too much on the in-person education, and we weren't proactively putting it out there for our brewers. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
it's been a
almost
big change.
accelerated the evolution of
Hmm.
your marketing strategy. It's like we knew it needed to
Yeah.
come partly online, but this kind of forced you to get it figured out
Yeah.
and get going with that. And hopefully,
Yeah.
like there's been a lot of positives, right? And able to reach more
Oh, for
people,
sure.
have more people join one educational training than you could have ever reached if you were traveling around. But I think there's still something to be said for that in-person experience. Like it's
Oh,
really
for
hard to
sure.
recreate that digitally.
Definitely. Yeah. But I feel we've definitely, there's a value add now that, we've been able to put in place that we didn't have before. So, and
Yep.
COVID, as unfortunate as this whole situation has been, there's certainly been some positives, for us to take away from it. And, this is one of them. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's been good. It's been really good. We needed it.
Awesome. And obviously, the last year has been quite the shift and, a little
Hmm.
bit chaotic, especially when COVID first hit. Nobody knew what was going on. I'm assuming you've had some stints of working from home. So, how are you finding balance right now in running Brew Culture and also managing your daily life with the family? And I'm sure many other things going on in your life. How do you find balance in your workday?
Yeah, no, for sure. It has been a lot tougher this year for sure, or the past year and a bit.
Hmm.
We've got two kids, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. So
Yep.
lucky enough that our 4-year-old's been able to remain in school the whole time. Our 8-year-old's been here half the time. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but she's been fantastic and rolled with it.
Hmm.
And we're still growing. It's been 8 years of growth. So
Yep.
we've been trying to manage that, but admittedly, living in Muskoka really helps.
Yeah.
I step outside, I smell the trees. My commute to work's 5 minutes. I often run to work and run home.
So good.
So that helps me unplug big time. The ability to go home and be there 5 minutes later and, sit on our back deck and stare at a forest, to be able to step outside my back door and go onto a trail from my house is huge for us. So my wife will tell you that I don't unplug very, very easily. But it certainly helps, where we live. So surrounding ourselves with the environment that we're in, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. And I love that that's at your back door. And it sounds like you
Yeah.
are a big fan of where you live. And I know a lot of the
Huge. Yeah.
listeners, they want to come visit Bracebridge and they want to know what's so special about this town 2 hours north of Bracebridge. So, or 2 hours north of Toronto.
Yeah.
So, what besides like your backyard oasis and the trails, like what
Mhm.
else is it that you love about this community?
The people, hands down, it's the people here. I grew up in a small enough community in Waterdown, and it's changed a lot, in the 20 plus years that I've been gone, certainly. But when I was a kid, we had about, I think, 20,000 people there. And you go down to Andy's home video, and you'd run into a dozen people on the street that you knew, and then you go in to see Andy, and everybody knows Andy. And like that was just sort of the community that we lived in. And at
Mhm.
that time, Toronto was still 35-minute drive down the highway. It wasn't that bad. And you fast forward a number of years, and that changed very quickly. And so I feel like Bracebridge gives me a lot of what I had as a kid growing up, and we were hoping to have that for our kids. So
Mhm.
we walk around town, we know many of the people that we see. They're it's the regular faces all the time, and it's really nice. So
Mhm. Love that.
yeah, I would yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Curious for somebody who is thinking about starting their business in a smaller town or relocating their business to a smaller town. Do you have any advice for them? Because I think a lot of people are hesitant to try to build a business when they're not in a metropolitan city, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah, I mean, again, I grew up a suburban kid, small town, but suburban kid in Toronto, and much of my working career was mostly around Toronto or in Toronto. I lived in downtown Toronto for a long time. Um, but here I am in Bracebridge, and I brought a business here from Vancouver, another metropolitan city. But
Yeah.
and we were asked, why would you move there? After leaving Vancouver, and you know what? It's totally possible, especially these days with technology, with the internet, and particularly what we have here in Muskoka. It's totally possible. And I think this year, with COVID, exactly what we're doing right now. We relied so heavily on, being in person. Um, I can't tell you how many friends that I have who have jobs that are, Toronto-based jobs, but they live here.
Yeah.
They're used to going down to the city 2, 3 days a week, and then they work remotely. Now they've been working remotely entirely, and a lot of them don't think that they're going to go back to, having to drive down the city 2, 3 days a week.
Hmm.
So it's totally possible. it's small towns can be tough. If you have something that you can bring to the small town, it really, is a benefit.
Mm,
It's of course hard to find work. If you could be as well educated as anyone, but if the work's not there, you're not going to be in luck. So I can certainly
mhm.
understand how some people might have reservations, but if you can bring something to the table, to the town,
Yeah.
I think that's a massive asset. And again, in the world that we live in 2021, we can totally do that.
Hmm.
So
It's so true. And even if like you're not bringing a business necessarily, but say
mhm,
you love gardening and you can
yeah,
volunteer to help a couple people with their garden, it's just like, what are you contributing to start fostering that community, to start making those relationships, which will lead to, many more outcomes. So I love
a
that. It's
hundred
like, what
percent.
can you
Yeah,
contribute?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
And final question, because this is a Spotlight Bracebridge series, I'm curious, what is your favorite location or nature spot or restaurant in Bracebridge that if somebody is coming to visit, you would say, you have to go
Yeah.
here?
Wow. That's a tough question. There's so many.
You can name a
Again,
few if you want.
we love it here. Well, yeah, I'll give you a couple, I guess. We're a young family, we're a very active family, we're a very outdoorsy family. So, I have to give a massive shout out to Bracebridge Resource Management Center. What a fantastic facility, or a place, I should say. It's not a
Mhm.
facility. It's a forest.
Yeah.
But as far as trails, for whether it be snowshoeing or cross country skiing, or we do a lot of mountain biking with the kids. I trail run. My wife trail runs. We use the heck out of the Bracebridge
Yeah.
Resource Management Center. So that's definitely a go-to for us. It's free to use. So
Amazing.
if you're just coming up for the weekend or whatever it might be, go check it out. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. Unless you go
Mm.
right now, the bugs are probably pretty bad. But
It's still worth
and
it.
yeah, exactly. And then I would also say we spend a lot of time at the beach. I mean, people come here to go to the lakes. So Kirby's Beach is hands down the best in town.
Mhm.
Such a beautiful spot. It can be busy if you go during the week, like we do. You go on a Tuesday afternoon after work. We'll take the little and barbecue something up, and honestly, there's probably two or three other local families, and that's it. It's a great little spot. Beach is beautiful there. It's great for the kids. Long, sort of, uh, gentle slope into the water. Kids can go
Mhm.
forever, and mom and dad can sit and enjoy a beverage.
That's amazing. And one last question, not Bracebridge related, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, as somebody who's been in business, I think you said 7, 8 years,
Hmm.
where do you currently hang out to get smarter? Like, I'm assuming you're always
Ooh.
learning and growing. Like, is it podcasts, books? Like, do you, study under someone, or have you kind of just felt like you've soaked in it all and now it's just about building your vision
Oh,
forward?
never. Yeah, no, you can always learn more. I'm a firm believer in that. Honestly, I just surrounding myself with people,
Mhm.
smart people, people who maybe have a better tune on different things that I might not know about.
Mhm.
Whether it's marketing or cryptocurrency, or management of people, whatever it might
Yep.
be. I spend a lot of time talking to people. I'm a social person.
Mhm.
I don't do well with books.
Yeah.
I get bored very quickly. I love books, don't get me wrong, and I wish I could sit down. I just don't sit very well for very long. I
No.
need to keep moving. So for me, I move my mouth a lot, and I talk to a lot of people. So I surround myself with great people, and soak whatever information I can, from whatever it is that they do, what inspires them, what their knowledge base might be, and
Mhm.
that's mostly how I soak up more information.
Yeah, it's a great
Sure.
reminder that we can learn so much just by asking others
Yeah.
questions. Like you don't have to ask Google all the time.
Yeah.
You can literally ask a real
No,
human.
it's the experiences too that other people bring, right? Like, I've experienced a lot, and in the 40 almost 2 years that I've been on this earth, and the 8 years
Mhm.
that I've been in business for myself. But you know what? You can always learn, and you can learn from other people's experiences.
Mhm.
So, whether they be good, bad, whatever it is. So, yeah, I like to talk to people, and hey, I have a lot more fun talking to people. So, yeah,
So fun. They always say it's like it's better to be interested than to be interesting as a person,
yeah,
right? Like I just want
yeah,
to be
for sure.
interested in everyone and like, then you don't have to worry about who you are so much.
Yeah, tell me more. I
um
ask a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So
it's a
always ask
great
questions.
quality to have. And probably, the reason why you're an entrepreneur is because you're endlessly curious, right? So
Yeah. Well,
cool.
I know I don't have all the answers, so
Hmm.
I go find them.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom on the podcast. It's just lovely to hear just like a true story with an entrepreneur who chased after their passion. And thank you just for cracking open and letting us all in on your journey. So we wish you all of the best. And where can we find you if we want to learn more information about brew culture or even about you personally?
The web, brewculture.com, easiest place to go.
Mhm.
Instagram, all the usual spots. If you want to hit me up, email is there, Daniele@brewculture.com.
Cool. And I will say the one
So
thing that was really fun about reading your website was that all of your team members, they say their favorite beers. So I was like writing down
yeah,
all of these lists of like, oh, I haven't tried that one yet. And this brewery keeps coming up in all of the team members' bios. So just a
yeah,
fun way to get to know the people behind your team.
for
So
sure.
thank you again for being on the show and we wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate